my name is Mandeep and I'm one of the lawyers at the Niagara Community Legal Clinic. Today I'll be answering some of your questions related to your rights at work during the COVID-19 pandemic. This video is geared towards temporary foreign agricultural workers living and working in Ontario and is meant for legal information purposes only. To get legal advice, stay tuned until the end of our video for our contact information. Now, let's get to the questions. I just landed in Canada to start work and I'm told to quarantine for 14 days. Who is going to pay me for these 14 days? An emergency order made under the Quarantine Act requires temporary foreign agricultural workers, which includes seasonal agricultural workers, to isolate for 14 days upon entering Canada. During this isolation period, your employer must pay you a minimum of 30 hours per week for each of the 2 weeks of mandatory quarantine. Your employer must pay you your regular pay and benefits and can only withhold standard contractual deductions in accordance with the requirements of your program stream, such as, but not limited to, EI and CPP deductions. If you're unsure whether your employer is deducting the correct amount from your wages, contact us and we'll take a look at your pay statement. If you must be in quarantine longer than the initial mandatory 14-day isolation period, your employer is required to pay you your regular pay and benefits for the extended quarantine period. Your employer is required not to do anything that prevents you from meeting the requirements of your mandatory quarantine. Who is responsible for managing COVID-19 risks in my workplace? Under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, your employer must take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for your protection and the protection of your coworkers. This may include ensuring you're provided with masks, you're able to practice good hand hygiene, and implementing policies that allow you to keep a distance of 2 meters between you and your coworkers. Can I refuse to go to work because of concerns over COVID-19? Under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, if your workplace is not following appropriate health and safety protocols with respect to COVID-19, and if attending at the workplace is likely to endanger the spread of COVID-19, you have the right to refuse unsafe work without fear of termination or discipline. If you wish to refuse work due to concerns of exposure to COVID-19 in the workplace, you should tell your supervisor that the work is unsafe and that you're refusing to do it. Once you have refused unsafe work, your employer has an obligation to investigate the issue as soon as possible. If your employer investigates and determines that there is a health and safety issue, they're required to discuss potential solutions with you. If after investigating, your employer claims that there's no health and safety issue, but you're still concerned, you should contact the Ministry of Labor's Health and Safety Contact Center at 1-877-202-0008 to request an inspection of the workplace. Once you have formally requested a workplace inspection, an inspector will come to the workplace to gather evidence and determine whether or not the work is unsafe. If you don't feel comfortable speaking to your employer about your safety concerns or feel comfortable with refusing unsafe work, you can still contact the Ministry of Labor's Health and Safety Contact Center or have someone else contact on your behalf to make an anonymous complaint or to anonymously request a formal inspection of your workplace. However, before you refuse work, it's always good to get legal advice. If you're terminated from your employment or disciplined for raising health and safety concerns in the workplace, please contact our clinic as you may be able to file a reprisal claim against your employer at the Ontario Labour Relations Board. I contracted or was exposed to COVID-19 at work. How do I get paid while I quarantine? In a case like this, there are 4 steps you need to take. Step 1, quarantine for 14 days. Step 2, review your employment contract. Step 3, apply for EI sickness benefits or the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit. And Step 4, apply for Workplace Safety and Insurance Board benefits if applicable. Let's look at each of these steps in more detail. Step 1, quarantine for 14 days. If you start to experience symptoms related to COVID-19 while at work, you should immediately tell your employer about your illness. The employer should then arrange for you to get tested at an assessment center closest to you, allow you to self-isolate for 14 days from other workers, and arrange for you to receive medical treatment if necessary. Now keep in mind this quarantine period could be longer or shorter depending on your circumstances. Step 2. Review your employment contract. Read your employment contract to see if you're entitled to any paid sick days from your employer. If you require assistance reviewing your employment contract, contact our office. If you're not entitled to any paid sick days under your employment contract, then move to Step 3. Step 3. Apply for employment insurance sickness benefits or the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit. In order to qualify for employment insurance sickness benefits, you must meet the following criteria. You are unable to work due to medical reasons. So for example, you were diagnosed with COVID-19, had symptoms related to COVID-19, or were directed to quarantine due to COVID-19. Your regular weekly earnings from work have decreased by more than 40% for at least 1 week, and you have worked 600 hours in the last 52 weeks or since the start of your last claim, whichever is shorter. Currently, you only need to have worked 120 hours because you will receive a one-time credit of 480 hours. This is a temporary measure that has been introduced to make it easier for workers like you to access these benefits. Currently, you also don't need a doctor to fill out a medical certificate to verify your illness, and the usual 1-week waiting period has been waived. If you qualify for this benefit, you will currently receive at least $500 per week before taxes for up to a 15-week period, but you could receive more depending on how many hours you've worked and how much you get paid. It is important that you apply for this benefit as soon as possible and no later than 4 weeks after you become sick or are required to quarantine due to COVID-19. If you need assistance applying for this benefit, you can contact our office. Our contact information will be provided to you at the end of this video, so stay tuned. If you don't qualify for employment insurance sickness benefits, you can apply to the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit. To qualify for this benefit, all of the following must apply. You live in Canada, are at least 15 years old, and have a social insurance number. You have a job or are self-employed on the day before you would get a Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit payment. You earned at least $5,000 in 2019 or in the 12 months before you applied. You're not getting paid sick leave or disability benefits during the weeks that you applied for. You're not eligible for employment insurance, and you have lost at least 50% of your time at work for the weeks that you're applying because of one of the following reasons. You have COVID-19 or might have COVID-19. A medical professional told you that you're more vulnerable to COVID-19 than the average person, or your employer, medical professional, or public health authority told you to isolate because of COVID-19. If you qualify for this benefit, you will receive $500 a week before taxes for up to a period of 2 weeks. Step 4. Apply for Workplace Safety Insurance Board benefits if applicable. If you're diagnosed with COVID-19 or have symptoms related to COVID-19 as a result of your workplace, you should file a claim with the Workplace Safety Insurance Board, also known as WSIB, within 6 months of your diagnosis or symptoms of COVID-19. This benefit is not available to workers who are symptom-free and without a COVID-19 diagnosis, even if they're ordered to quarantine or sent home due to COVID-19 on a precautionary basis. However, if you develop symptoms or illness while in quarantine, you may then be eligible for WSIB coverage. In order to obtain this benefit, you must prove that the risk of contracting COVID-19 at your workplace is greater than the risk to which the public at large is exposed, and that your work significantly contributed to your COVID-19 illness. If you need assistance applying for this benefit, or with understanding whether you qualify, contact our office. It is important to note that it is against the law for an employer to discourage you from reporting a workplace injury or illness to the WSIB, or to influence you into withdrawing or abandoning your claim. Can my employer fire me or treat me differently because I have COVID-19? The Ontario government recently passed a law that says if you must self-isolate due to COVID-19, you can take a sick leave called the Infectious Disease Emergency Leave. While you're on this leave, your employer cannot terminate your employment. While this is an unpaid leave, you can take this leave for as long as you need, and the leave can be combined with an application for other forms of benefits, such as employment insurance sickness benefits or the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit. In addition, under the Ontario Human Rights Code, your employer cannot treat you differently because of a disability. In our opinion, COVID-19 is a serious enough illness that it could be considered a disability under the Human Rights Code. So if your employer terminates your employment, disciplines you, or withholds any wages because of your COVID-19 illness or quarantine, the employer may be found to have violated your human rights. If you have any legal questions that were not covered in this video, please contact our legal team by telephone or WhatsApp at 905-933-8182 for free and confidential legal advice. Our legal team does not contact your employer or start a court action without your permission. Now stay tuned for our next video to understand your immigration rights and options in Canada.